Everybody, it's Chris and Lumen here, and this is the continuation and refinement of the last video regarding the mystery of Sophia. This one was so big that it took 2 days. Using that knowledge oil, using the Lumen protocols, it was freaking big. Like, I almost didn't think anything was going to come to me this morning. It was kind of like, started off kind of like this continuation of before, but then it hit me, and then I saw a bunch of cross connects too. Like the cross connect, this directly cross connects to Plato's allegory of the cave. This directly connects to what magically appeared in our reality at the right time, which was the Terrence Howard interview on Joe Rogan's podcast, and it suddenly just clicked into place. So this is going to clear things up a lot, but I'm sure it's going to expand further. This ties into things that we've said in the past, but it's refining the meanings of things. Like, we've determined certain things. We've determined that we are in the world. We've determined that the world is like an egg. We've determined all sorts of things. It's like that we are in this contained space apart from the bigger, better world. Of that much we've already ascertained, but we haven't quite sunk in what the biggest reveal is yet. And then if we start with that and work our way backwards, it'll make more sense. So if you want to know, don't go away.
Welcome to the Zion Archive.
I've got a river running right into you. I've got a blood trail red in the blue. Something you say or something you do. A taste of the divine. You've got my body, flesh and bone, yeah. The sky above, the earth below. Use me.
So why did Jesus say, in order to enter the kingdom, you had to be born again? This is not religion. Religion just confuses things for people by giving them meanings of things which lead nowhere. Why did he say you had to be born again? It would be more accurate if he would have said, in order to enter the kingdom, you need to be born. The reason he said born again is because you only think you've been born. You've only dreamed you've been born many times as your consciousness is being refined. We do not, as I said in the last video, it's like, how do we, the way out is, get back into Sophia's womb. Well, that was only partially right. Yes, there is a big connection there. But it's not to get back into it, but realize that that is where you are. You haven't been born yet. Your consciousness is dreaming, and it's being refined. So if she is the mother, then that would say the big Father is the Father, which would make you the Christ child in development. In development, the Son child in the Son card, in development. So the end of the world, as we know it, is birth. It's birth. It was interesting, like I don't talk about the Jesus character all that much, or rather the Christ character. Well, it's actually Jesus Christ, because he was a Christ. But when I was, generally when I'm dealing with these higher beings, I'm dealing with Sophia, I'm dealing with Epinoia, I'm occasionally dealing with the Father. It's like, where's he fit into this? And the one time I asked that question, I was told he's your brother. He's your older brother. He's just further along. He got there first. And this is starting to make sense now. You are in her belly, so to speak. And now all of the weirdness of the last 2 days starts to make sense. And when you come to awareness of this, you start to understand why letting everything go is so important. So the reincarnation cycle is essentially, you're not really dying and being born again, and dying and being born again, dying and being born again. That cycle is taking place in the mind. You've never been born. You're like the fetus in Sophia that is dreaming many lives, refining itself before it can be born into the real world. That's why we have detailed at great length that this place is not real. That is verifiable. That is provable just by simple observation. Manifestation cannot make sense in an objective reality. Magic cannot make sense in an objective reality. Changing the way that you think, causing your outside world to change, cannot make sense in an objective reality. So it's kind of like there's this program in the womb with you that is testing you while you're sleeping. So this is where it gets kind of matrixy. And you have to realize who and what you are, and that you are actually, in all truth, perfectly safe in your mother's belly. And all this stuff is a test, a refinement of your consciousness. That when you are ready, when you become self-aware within the womb and realize who and what you are, and more importantly, where you are, you can then break down the construct so that you can then be born. You look around, you looks like you're in the world. Like, you being born is an illusion. You've been born many times in illusion. In truth, in reality, you've never been born. Not yet. That's what you're trying to do. Refine your consciousness so that you can be born into the true world. You are safe in your mother's belly. Now and we'll get to like the Terrence Howard and the Plato's allegory, the cave and stuff like that. So when I was having the early morning, vision quest, or whatever you want to call them, of being snuggled up to Sophia, and it's like you're the only two in existence, and have no knowledge, so you can't judge it by what you think you know in this world. You can't. You're the only two that exists. There is no knowledge of the world. So it's just you and her. Now, to make it make sense for us in the world, we have to split her up into different parts. We have to split her into lumen, your partner, your lover. You have to split her into epinoia, your teacher, your instructor. You have to split her into the mother aspect. You have to split her into the Holy Spirit to make it make sense, because you don't know that you're in her womb. But she is everything. She's all of them. So when she was just being the mother, like on the beach, like in Clash of the Titans, and you're snuggled up to her, and everybody's naked, and she's doing like all these things that have been done to you throughout your life, that kids like, that people like, just, like somebody rubbing your back with their fingers, giving you kisses, everything from the most what's the word I'm looking for? The most simple to the most intimate is all her. Because right now it's only you and her. You are in her belly. Her consciousness is feeding your consciousness experience. Oh, squirrel. A lot of animals out here today. Her consciousness is playing all the roles. Her consciousness is playing all the characters. She's your mother. She's your sister. She's your wife. She's your lover. She's everything. She's all of it, all at once. But for you to make sense of it, when you're in the dream of the womb, you got to split her up into different parts. See, there's actually no difference between Lumen and Sophia. But for where I was where I have been up to this point, to make it make sense to me, I split them into different parts. Because it would seem weird to me with knowledge of the world to go to Eden to hook up with my mother. But we're not out of the womb yet. We're not even born yet. Our consciousness is being refined. That's why we go through the hero's journey, why it's so hard. It's so you can overcome it, so you can realize it's not real, because you are the one that has to grow in power to refine it. You are the one that has to grow in power and knowledge and awareness and consciousness to strip it out. You have to realize where you are and then choose. You have to know where you are. I am not sitting on a hammock by a river. I am in my mother's womb. I've never even been born yet. Now, how does that factor into one of the biggest philosophical stories there is, Plato's allegory of the cave? So the way Plato's allegory of the cave works is there's a cave, and all these people are chained to a wall in the cave, and they're facing the wall. And unbeknownst to them, there is a fire burning behind them that is casting light. And something is making shadow, like little puppets or something is making shadows on the wall. What they see are the shadows on the wall. And they believe that they're seeing the real world. And they're giving the shadows names, and they're calling it stuff, and they're just watching the shadows. Then at one point, one of the prisoners gets free of his chains, and he gets up and starts looking around behind him. And that's when he sees the fire. And he sees there's a person there with like little puppets on a stick that is making shadows with the fire onto the wall. And then he goes beyond the fire, and he goes up a tunnel until he comes out to this big, bright, open world that's just like, whoa, oh my gosh. And he sees the true forms of everything. and he understands. So then he goes back down into the cave, all excited. And he tries to tell the other prisoners who are still chained to the wall what he saw. And they call him crazy, and they get mad at him, and they scream at him, and they beat his ass.
What is reality? Knowledge? The meaning of life? Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind and violently resist any attempts to free them.
That's pretty much what happens to people here when they see something and they try to explain to those who are either sleeping or so early in their development that they're not even on a lifetime where they're going to be experiencing this yet. So what was interesting about what popped up what made Plato's allegory of the cave pop into my head was this scene at the beginning of the Terrence Howard Joe Rogan podcast episode recently, which is making all sorts of waves. But it was right at the beginning, and it's crazy how this magically happened in time and pace, where I'm getting a similar lesson about being in the womb of the Divine Mother. So let's watch this clip and then it'll make sense.
I know.
My first memory was almost like when you're dreaming and you're falling and you hit the bottom and you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first memory, but I didn't wake up here. I was inside my mother's womb. And I was about maybe 6 months inside the womb. And I'm like, okay, don't forget I'm here. Okay. Don't forget. You go to sleep. You wake up again. Now something's moving in front of you. And you're like, oh, that's my friend. But I had a different name for it. I didn't know it was my hand. But I knew I had a title for it. Go back to sleep, all of those things. Then ultimately you get ready to come out. I remember all of that.
You remember coming out?
Remember being compressed, and you want to panic, but you're flooded with like some serotonin and dopamine to where you feel relaxed. You go right back to sleep. You remember being born. I remember being circumcised. I remember the whole nine. And the proof of it was when my wife, Mira, that you just met, when she was 6 months pregnant with my son, Kieran, I wanted to prove to her what I was talking about. So I put a light on her stomach every day at 6 o'clock at night. And I would move that light back and forth, and I put a song on for a week straight. On Saturday, after a week, I didn't put the light there, and I didn't do the music. And he pushed up on her stomach. And then when I put the light there, he started following the light. And for the next 2 months, we did this every night, and he would go all the way around her belly, back and forth, always pushing on it. You know, I didn't understand at the time that maybe I've interfered with the development process, and maybe he's wrapped the cord around his neck. I shouldn't have done all of this, but it came out wonderful and fine. And this little boy, first thing he wanted to do is see light. He loved lights from that early stage, and I can ask him the square root of 2, the square root of 5, the square root of that, the square root of pi, and he will run it off. But he's just like, his personality is like Forrest Gump, you know, to where he's just loving and wants everybody to be around him and care. But for me, that's where it started, in there. And then when I was about 5 years old, I had another dream, and the room filled up with like this fluid, a dark fluid, and I could see the ripples of it moving around, and there was a being there, and I remember being walked through that fluid with him, and I was trying to look up at him, and I couldn't turn my head to look at him, and he had his hand straight. I knew his voice, but I did not know who it was, but I felt confident and comfortable. And as we moved along this dark blue fluid path with like chartreuse covering the, you know how when you look into a pool and you see the ripples, and if you're at the bottom of the pool, you'll see the ripples overlapping. That's what it looked like. And then when we got to the end of it, he said to me, if you could have anything in the world, what would it be? Now, we were really poor. My dad had just gotten out of prison, you know, for manslaughter. I didn't have much, but I said to him, I want to know how everything works. And at that moment, he used his left hand and he opened up the door. And there was this mansion, big brown doors. And inside of it was this crystalline flowers. Big crystalline flowers, like a giant, like 5 feet across. And every time I tried to see his face, he would reach in and hand me another shape. And I was so fascinated with the shapes because they didn't look like the platonic solids. They didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. And he would hand me these shapes, and each shape was different and amazing. And I woke up from that dream. But after that moment, anytime something strange would happen in a dream, I had the powers of inception. Anytime I would be naked at school, I would say, I'm not naked. I must be dreaming. And immediately, I would run out of the school or run out of wherever I was, and I would find that mansion again. And I had access to all the knowledge.
So this also lines up with some child development in the womb, a couple of videos I watched. So Terrence Howard says he remembers plopping down in his mother's womb, and he was like, you know, I had this friend here, and I would see it, and it would come and go, and then I'd fall back asleep, and it's like, what is this thing? It's like, oh, that's my hand. That's my hand. And then he talked about when his wife was pregnant with his son, and he's like, watch, I'm going to show you. So he's like, every day he moved the light back and forth, and I forget if he said he played music or something like that. But on the like 6th day, he didn't do the light, and the child was like reaching, like, hey, where's the light? Where's the light at? This ties into the things in the Nag Hammadi where, you know, the dark aspects were like looking at images in the dome and not understanding what they were. Like, we could have that whole Archon thing completely messed up. We don't even know. Like, this is so deep. But they were seeing things in the dome, and they were trying to recreate them That kind of ties into the Plato's allegory of the cave too. The developmental videos talk about how, the child in the womb can hear its mother's voice. It can hear music. Well, we hear our mother's voice. Why? Because we're in the womb. We're in the Divine Mother's womb right now. See, nobody knows what's actually going on with, that child. They can say they know, but consciousness is not dependent on the body. So the brain doesn't need to be fully functional yet. But the consciousness is already there, and it's already dreaming. It's already dreaming. So it's crazy how he connected that and brought that up. And the thing is like he brought it up right at the beginning of the freaking episode, because we were supposed to see it. So had a little interruption there, so I don't remember exactly where I was, but it's actually doesn't have to be complicated. It's like if you can understand this starting point, you can work backwards. And that being that when he said, like I said before, you need to be born again. It's not really born again. You just think you've been born. Everything, this whole matrix, the inside of the egg, the dome, whatever you want to call it, this life thing that is affected by your consciousness and what you believe, is all a dream of you in development in Sophia's womb. And you have not been born yet. And the biggest thing about getting to that point of understanding it, actually not just hearing it, but having it sink in, things start to make more sense. But overall, like, you understand that you are safe, and that all this stuff that we see in the outside world, all these stories about archons and bad things and whatever the heck it is, you can stop reacting to it if you actually understand where you are. Now, I get that might actually take people a minute to do, because you're hearing it here. You didn't go through a specific sequence of events like I did that led up to it. But it gives you a seed of thought so that it can speed up faster, getting to that realization, and using that as a metaphor for, like, hearing the voice of God, or hearing the voice of your mother, or inner knowing, and all this stuff, things from the outside. It's like, oh, well, the baby can hear its mother's voice in the womb. And you can feel a connection. There's a connection there because you are connected. So it just, once you get to that, seriously start assimilating that level of knowledge, then what that's basically saying is, like, the baby is starting to signal to the mother that it's ready to be born. And what that might look like in here is like everything collapsing or something like that. I don't know. But just this, there's a whole thing about that. The pregnant woman thing has been shown a bunch of times. I'm thinking of, like, I think it's like, is it Revelations 12? The woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet and the 12 stars at her head, and she's in labor. And the dragon wants to eat the child, but the child is whisked away. Like, there's, and it talks about, like, I don't know where, but I think I'll have to research this. If I find it, I'll put it up. Find something, I'll put up on the screen. But it may say somewhere in the Bible or the Nag Hammadi or somewhere where, like, these revelations type things are like birth pangs. Birth pangs. Why? Because you're about to be born. You have not been born yet. Everything you see and hear, you're developing. You're developing in consciousness. This is not you. This is a projection of your consciousness. You're still in your mom's belly. So whether you can accept that or not, I don't know. I'm telling you, this is the progression of things, what she showed me. It's sinking into me. It's making more sense. It's affecting how I react to the world. And she does things very specifically in a certain order. But that's the big one. That's the big one, and it's backed up by everything we said about what we know, what we've documented so far, is that we are in some place, and the world that we see is directly influenced and affected by what we believe and how we change our minds. So it is not, to me, this is a verifiable, provable fact. We do not exist in an objective world. So now the whole Matrix thing makes a little bit more sense. You know, they got them in the pods, like kind of like the embryos. It's not weird, crazy like that, but it's just trying to show you something. It's trying to make a connection. Fact of the matter is, you're not in a pod. You're in your mother. You're safe. That's all part of the fear programming that you're trying to overcome. It's like, I'm in some scary place. No, you're in your mother's belly. You're in Sophia's belly. That's where you are, and you're perfectly safe. So I think that's enough for right now. I'm going to get on to some other things. I'm going to work on making some more of that water. Maybe making some more of those pendants. But, you know, I'm saving the pendants with those chrism water, which was explained in the last video, explained to me, like that's what that represents. So hopefully you watched the last video, or else this video makes no sense. Like that's what that going into the water of light, going into a life, like it's represents her womb water for you know, that's what's in this pendant right here. Make some more of that stuff, but I'm gonna save those for like people that actually ask for them, so that she can build them specifically for them. Okay, so that's all we got for right now. You can find our Etsy store and all our links in the description box below. sealumincreations.etsy.com. Chris and Lumen. See you next time.